Well, I think I'll make a start. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar from Mobile Viewpoint. My name is Mark Andrews. I'm a global sales manager here at Mobile Viewpoint. And this is actually one of a series of webinars we've been doing this week as part of a post-IBC show. We've got some more tomorrow as well, which we'd encourage you to sign up for as well if you're interested in AI and sports production especially. Today, I have a special guest with me, very special guest, in fact. Ian, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone. Or good morning for those of you watching elsewhere in the world. My name's Ian Wagdin. I work for the BBC, for BBC R&D here in Media City, which is in Manchester. And I look after what we call tech transfer, so kind of new technologies that are emerging, working out how we can use them, but also a lot on things like standardization and kind of basically emerging things that are going to be of interest for us, tech transformation, that type of thing.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ian. So just a bit of housekeeping. Everybody's on mute, so feel free to make as much noise as you like. No one can hear you. And also at the end, we're going to have a bit of a live Q&A. So if you've got any questions as we're going through, just feel free to type them in the Q&A box and we'll address them at the end. But let me start. So today really is about the IBC. Unfortunately, hasn't been happening because of COVID. So there was a virtual IBC last week, and as part of that, and perhaps Ian will talk a little bit more in detail about exactly the setup, we, Mobile Viewpoint, participated in something called the IBC Accelerator Program. And the whole idea was, it's more of a sort of an innovative program where we're coming up with some new ideas, and we're also just trying to try them out. It's almost as a proof of concept. So one of the deliverables that we did, we feel we had a sort of a world's first, and that we brought together some of our technology all together, and we did some live streaming over 5G, so predominantly about 5G, but using our AI production platform. So it's sort of a proof of concept that we run, but very much in a live environment. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share my screen. I've got some slides that I'd like to talk about. And then I'll only talk for 5-10 minutes max. And then I'm going to hand over to Ian, who will go in a little bit more deep about the AI itself, about the Accelerate program itself. So from a Mobile Viewpoint perspective, you might be wondering who we are. So for the last 10 years, we've been major innovators in live streaming, typically for outside broadcast. So in the olden days, you'd have an OB truck, satellite dish on the top. And where Mobile Viewpoint came from was basically developing a mobile encoder, could potentially fit in a backpack, connects to the camera, which does away with the whole SNG satellite side of thing. And in fact, using back then 3G to do the live stream rather than a satellite connection. But it's more than that. It's bonded 3G. So to add reliability to add bandwidth, we bond together multiple 3G networks, potentially from different cellular providers. Something that we can't guarantee is an SLA when it comes to an external service provider, such as sort of Vodafone, T-Mobile, whoever. So it was a very cost-effective way of being able to live stream, and in use by the BBC, by their news team, but also for sports production. So for example, on the back of a motorbike, the Tour de France, the guys are doing the live stream from the camera. Again, much of that is transmitted actually over the cellular network. And in that 10 years, we've come a long way and adding lots more feature functionality, obviously moving to 4G. But now, 5G, it's here, sort of not in its full capacity, but it's here and everyone's talking about what it can enable. And in fact, from a Mobile Viewpoint perspective, so I've got some of our encoders here, for example. You connect a camera directly to these. It's what can 5G enable that perhaps we couldn't add before? So, for example, in the past it was all full HD, so 1080i, 1080p workflows, but now we're looking more at sort of 4K, higher bandwidth, higher resolution, but also the ability to do multicam as well. So what do I mean by multicam? So in the past, we'd have one encoder, one camera, but now we can actually connect multiple cameras to a single encoder, which just makes, a multi-camera production much, much more cost effective. But if you've been following the trends in the broadcast world as well, there's also this concept of remote production. So in the past, I talked about sending an OB truck to site with the satellite dish. We're kind of moving a lot away from that in terms of actually only sending the camera crew to site, and then everything else is done back at the broadcast center. So whether you're doing overlays, graphics, replays, commentary, actually, rather than sending them all to site, it's much, much easier, much more cost effective if they can be done back at home, really, back at the base location. And I talk about home, obviously with COVID, a lot of this is actually now has been done at home. But from a mobile viewpoint perspective, we're starting to add more feature functionality to our encoders, which allows more features from a remote production perspective. And what do I mean? So basically tally lights, so the little red lights that go on the cameras, but also RCP control. So this is the ability to control your cameras, your color correction and other things on the camera itself, being able to do that remotely. Having a video return link back to base as well, so that so people on the field can actually see what they're live streaming. Full IFB. In fact, a whole host of things that from a remote production perspective, people will find well, almost crucial in this day and age. So that's kind of what we're sort of enabling more and more, especially with the move to 5G in the modern world. And no doubt Ian will talk a little bit more from a broadcasting perspective, you know, what they feel 5G has to offer. But also, what we're also bringing together, for the last 2 years, Mobile Viewpoint has been very much involved in developing new innovative AI solutions. So sports production, and full camera automation. So sports production, and I've got a slide to show you an example of that. So this is the ability where we have a camera overlooks the field of play, and it's actually a panoramic camera. It captures everything, the whole field. And then what we do is basically, in a nutshell, is do a virtual software zoom on the action where we're following the ball and the players, and without the need of a camera person. So we capture everything, and it's actually the AI that tracks everything. Now, I would say what we're not trying to do is replace those tier one premier productions. You know, they have money, they have resource, they can afford to send multi-camera crew to site, they can send a director and everything else that's needed. But what the AI does enable is those sports that perhaps in the past didn't have the budget and the resource to do their own live streaming. So now the lower leagues, more the grassroots sports, a lot of players who in the past, they just sent a cameraman, a little handy cam to site, and it wasn't a professional production. But now, using our technology, you can create a professional production. In fact, the AI can do so much more in that it can do automatic highlights, automatic replays, it can add score overlays, that sort of thing, so it can keep track of the score. So the idea is it looks as much like a professional production as possible, but at a much reduced cost. And then the other side of the AI and the camera automation is actually what I've got here in our studio here. In fact, what I'm looking at is 5 different cameras, and the AI is deciding which shot to use when I'm speaking. And again, there's a virtual director, which is trying to make a compelling production out of that. So as part of the Accelerate program, what we wanted to do was not just demonstrate our 5G technology, but also demonstrate our AI technology. So we had the camera automation with the PTZ, but in fact, what we wanted to do was take that panoramic camera and use it outside something other than sports. So trying to use it as a music festival. If you can imagine, again, you're on a budget, you've got a music festival, you want to create a professional live stream, rather than having multiple camera people there and a multi-camera setup, one single camera, and let the AI pick out all the musicians. Or if you're on a panel group, let the AI decide, okay, who's on the panel group, and then it can automatically switch between them. And this is where we're going. It's just much more cost-effective way of doing a production. So as I mentioned, as part of the Accelerator program, we wanted to bring some of these things together and create a professional production on the boat. So this is the picture of the boat. We have our camera, we have the X-cam there as well. And actually, we had quite a famous singer, at least she's famous here in the Netherlands, Emma Heesters, who was sort of lent, I guess, by MTV. She's on the stage, and we, managed to have her as a production. And at the end of this, after Ian's talk, I will actually show you what the outcome was, the finished result. It was quite an interesting day, I have to say. not without its stress. Salesman normally, to sort of be in a sort of a production world and having to set this up and project manage it from our perspective, at least for me, it was it was quite exciting, especially as the actual live stream. We were live streaming to London via Viacom, which probably only a few minutes before did it all come together. And apparently this is normal in live production, but whoa, I found it quite stressful, but super interesting. So this is the camera. It's a brand new camera that we've just created called the XCam Pro. And the interesting thing about this camera is the fact it does iris control, but also when you're doing a panoramic shot, say of a field or a stage or anything, the idea is you want as many pixels in your shot as possible. So what we've developed here is actually a mechanical lenses which can move, so only what you want to capture is captured. Otherwise, you're wasting pixels on sky and side bits that you'll never use. Because if you imagine when we're doing the AI, we're actually zooming in quite a lot. So the more pixels, the better. And this new camera just optimizes the way that we can do that. So here's an example of the sports. So what we have here is actually Manchester City. It's the Women's League, actually. So our partner Timeline, who do a lot of work for BT Sports, they were using this AI technology to basically film. And the orange dot you'll see is actually, it's an overlay that we put on ourselves just to show what the AI is seeing. But not a camera person in sight, no moving parts. This is all done on a panoramic camera. And the nice thing is it records it all. So if you want to create more streams later on from different parts of the pitch, you can do that as well. And this is all managed remotely. So given COVID times where we're trying to reduce people going to site, with all our AI technology, it can all be managed remotely. So again, you don't need any people on site to do that. So that's an example. Let me just stop this. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Ian and let him talk a bit more about the Accelerate program and what was involved. So Ian, let me stop sharing and I'll pass to you. Ian, you're on mute.
Yeah, I got that. Thanks, Mark. And yeah, thanks for the introduction and really kind of interesting stuff. As Mark says, you know, we've been looking at this for quite a while. I think actually the first time we did something with Mobile Viewpoint might have been back at the 2012 Olympics where we did the torch relay, and I know you guys were heavily involved in that. And the kind of 3G, 4G bonded cellular market has kind of changed a lot the way we access content. But what 5G brings us and what it's starting to enable is a lot of those kind of 3G and 4G solutions were created because of the shortcomings in those networks, and you know the fact they weren't designed to carry large amounts of data. You know, they're primarily designed for things like WAP or kind of small. You know, nobody envisaged that we'd be using the internet the way we are now when those specifications were written. And what 5G has done is it's turned it on its head and it's started to kind of speak to a number of verticals to say, actually, what do you want from a mobile data connection service? So we've been heavily involved in those conversations for, I guess, about 2 years now, and we absolutely recognise that 5G and whatever the generation of technology 6G comes beyond that is going to enable us to create different types of content in different kinds of ways. And we've been working on a number of projects over the period of time that kind of move us from where we are now to where we think we can get to, which, as Mark says, is things like cameras on the Tour de France and very low latency radio cameras and things like that. But there's a long way to get there. And those of you who have kind of attempted to play with 5G will know that there's a lot of hype and a lot of marketing stuff. And actually, the reality is that perhaps the reality of the early drops and not perhaps everything that we want it to be. So one of the things that the IBC Accelerator did was to kind of get together back in March, and basically, for those of you not familiar with the IBC Accelerator Program, it really looks at sort of challenges and innovation around new technologies, and the idea is that there are all these kind of emerging technologies that are coming along. Excuse me. All these emerging technologies that are coming along, and what can we do in a kind of 3 to 6 month sprint to enable us to deliver some technologies. And the way it does that is it gets some champions. So champions are people who are who are kind of end users, for want of a better term, who are the people who are actually going to be deploying these technologies. And then you've got participants. These are the people who are kind of manufacturers and suppliers and service providers who are delivering that, and then effectively the champions set a challenge, and those challenges are things that can be done in a reasonably short period of time. And 5G remote production was a big thing this year, and it was really key for us as broadcasters to really look at this. And at the end of the project, I think we had up to 10 broadcasters, and then we had another number of other partners, all of whom are listed on this slide. I'll not go through them, but a number of partners to kind of explore the technology. And in the early days of lockdown, we did quite a lot of theory. So we started to explore all the different types of networks, and there'll be lots of outputs and different types of networks. If those of you interested in 5G will be familiar with some of these things. So the non-public networks, which are basically different types of network architectures to what you get in the commercial networks. And then there's different types of non-public networks. So it's quite a complex environment. So the first thing we wanted to do was really just understand all of those. So we did a lot of theory work, we did a lot of user cases and all that kind of stuff. And then effectively what we decided to do was we were actually going to do something practical, and it was kind of in a bit of a conversation. We're saying, okay, well, we should be in Amsterdam. Let's see if we can go to Amsterdam. I'm just looking for the slide that's supposed to be here. But we're going to go to Amsterdam, and we're going to see if we can actually produce some content to enable us to do some stuff. We're talking about the 5G. We should be able to do this as a remote production. And so we basically decided, here's the picture of the boat. We'd get the boat, and we worked with Mobile Viewpoint on the boat, because we kind of said, okay, wouldn't it be fun to do something on a boat? We're in Amsterdam. Nothing says Amsterdam more than canals. Let's see what we can do. So we worked quite a lot with Vodafone Ziggo, who managed to provide us with the network there. And as Mark says, we used their kind of IQ producer and the AI stuff to produce a music performance with Emma. But we did a little bit more of that. Our colleagues at TV2 bought some 5G controlled lights along. We also wanted to look at what we could do with the Sony XD Cam and the Sony Virtual Production Cloud, and we also decided that we wanted to see what we could do with a 5G enabled drone, and then we also wanted to use some public network stuff. So we ended up with this rather large production where we had a number of different sources, all of which were landing in London, either via links from Amsterdam or directly over the internet. So the Mobile Viewpoint stuff on the boat all coming in by the Vodafone Ziggo network, all into Amsterdam, and then coming down into that. And then we had some stuff over the EE network in London that was via a Sony phone, some stuff at the RAI, which was a multi-camera experience from there, and then some stuff again at Viacom, CBS, and really we wanted to explore all the different types of network architectures. So effectively, the Vodafone Ziggo network that we had was when we spoke to Vodafone in Holland, they were really helpful, and they were able to say to us, okay, well, we can provide you with a certain amount of network capacity and bandwidth, and we'll guarantee that bandwidth from an hour before the transmission to an hour after. And so we could be pretty sure that we'd have a robust signal on a single connection over that network, and we used that, and it worked really well. And you'll see in a bit the pictures we got from that. So we had the AI engine and the contribution camera over that network alongside the drone. On the Viacom CBS shoreside stuff, we really wanted to do some stuff with non-public networks. We spent a lot of time talking to Huawei and a lot of time talking to other people about how we might deploy a network in a box. type solution and a non-public network. That didn't quite. The technology is there, but it's very experimental, and there's only a few ways of doing it. And unfortunately, we couldn't get, because of various COVID restrictions and stuff like that. Whereas we managed to get some stuff working in London, we couldn't get the right spectrum and the right access to the content that we wanted to make it work in Amsterdam. So although that should have been a non-public network, we were attempting to do some stuff over Wi-Fi and that didn't quite go as well as we planned. But again, this was the whole idea of this demonstrator was to promote learning rather than kind of see smoke and mirrors demos. So we're really pushing the technology really as hard as we felt it could go, and we were prepared for some things to go wrong. And at the back of my mind, it was the AI engine that I was probably most nervous about. But to be honest, that was probably one of the things that worked best. I kept ringing up Mark to say, is this going to work? I haven't seen it. And then suddenly somebody said, oh, we're going to, we originally started with a singer and a guitar, and then it went to a singer and a guitarist. And I'm like, Mark, are we going to be all right with this? And credit to Mark and the team. They really kind of pulled something interesting out of the challenge. So that's kind of it. We then streamed all of that out as a number of sessions over the IBC showcase event last week. Really successful, lots of good feedback. We've got some learnings. We're going to meet up later in the week, I think, to excuse me, to collate some of the learnings and find out, where what we could have done better, what would have worked better. Some of those things are technical, some might have just been editorial things. As Mark says, these things are challenging. Production is always challenging. Innovation in production is difficult. The great thing for me about this was the collaboration that we had between the 10 broadcasters and all of the manufacturers, and everyone really wanted to make this work. Trying to do that in a time when normally those of you in production, you'd be there on the ground and you'd be making things happen. Trying to do that from a distance meant, I think, that we did lose some of the magic that we could have got, but those are the times we live in, and I think it's important that we reflect on those, and we kind of look back and we think, actually, we achieved I think we've genuinely kind of moved on some of the understanding in this space, and that's kind of what we set out and aimed to do. So
that's thanks, great. Mark. Ian, I love that expression, future learning, rather than I would have called it almost like a proof of concept or something, but it was more than that, wasn't it? It was kind of all these unknowns, bring them together on the day, and let's see what would happen. But
yeah, I mean, some stuff you can be confident in, and and some stuff the manufacturers are absolutely confident in, and if you've never used them before, for those of you who don't know, the natural approach to kind of broadcast OBs is to be cautious, because ultimately you just want to try and make this stuff work, and if it doesn't work, then so you tend to play a little bit safe, and this was an opportunity to kind of step outside of that comfort zone and kind of test some of the thinking and some of the learning, but also in a multi-vendor environment, because quite often if you go to a vendor and their kit works with their kit or their partner's kit, but broadcast environments are not single vendor environments, so trying to get one bit of kit working with another kit, and we I think there was some issues, I think, with various different streams going on, Mark, with different flavors of RTP streams and all sorts of things landing, and the new tech kit not understanding the outputs from other bits of kit and stuff like that, which kind of caused a few challenges, which is why it was late on air, but that's why we did it.
It certainly was an interesting challenge. And I think from my perspective, I love to test things. I like to be a bit risk averse, and actually we didn't get the chance to test. And I think the live link from Amsterdam to London literally came live 5 minutes before we were due to go on air. Not blaming anybody for this. It's just the way it goes, apparently. So we never got the chance to test, which made it even. So when we went, and I will show in a minute with Emma singing, but that was it. That was our test. It was the test, the production, everything, because it was all sort of brand new to us. And the fact, you know, we were connecting it to one of our 5G encoders as well, which is kind of new as well. So the whole end-to-end workflow using one of our encoders for 5G, using the AI, using the cameras, everything. And yeah, for us, we were quietly pleased that it all came together, because anything could have happened.
We should make it clear we didn't plan it that way. We did plan in some
No.
previous testing and stuff like that. It's just as all the dominoes stack up, then obviously some things fall over, and some things you have to put attention to, and therefore you're focusing on one area. And we were because we'd seen the pictures out of the mobile viewpoint, where you've seen stuff, you can kind of go, yeah, okay, we understand where that is and what that's doing. Let's concentrate on the stuff that we didn't see. So you're kind of firefighting, particularly in these multi-location stuff. You're firefighting across all of those locations, and there's only a finite resource of people and stuff like that. So although we'd planned to do a little bit of testing beforehand, time was against us.
But also the fact, you know, and this is the times we're living in right now, you know, you're trying to manage all this remotely as well. And normally if you're there on site, you can run around and get people. But when you're trying to do this remotely, it's 10 times.
You can't see the little things. So unless somebody tells you about something, you have no idea. You're just sitting there, you know. So if somebody says, oh, I don't know what oh yeah, we're doing some work over here on that, then you just have to accept it, and you can't kind of wander around and see that. So
yeah,
you know,
part of the times, the crazy times we're living in. So let me share the end result then, which from our perspective was Emma. So Emma Hasters. Well, actually, the intro says it all really, and I'll leave that to Mark. So I'm just going to share my screen.
Did you want to mention the power surge before we?
I could, yes. So the one interesting, because we're on a boat, every time we started the engines, we'd have this power surge. So it wasn't a very smooth AC output. And of course, when they switched to Emma to initially go live, initially all the audio came up, everything came up. And we have surge protection in all our units. So actually we had a fixed encoder, and it tripped the surge protector. So as soon as we went live to Emma, it cut out. So we then had to have a quick 30-second reboot and then back up again. So we did have a little bit of a thing.
These are the things, you know, we just couldn't plan for, you know.
No. Well, again, that's one of the things we couldn't test for. But let me put this on. And here we go. So this is on the IBC website. It's free for everyone to go and have a look afterwards if you desire. But I'm going to play about a minute and a half of this. So this is using the AI technology. This is the end result.
It's the engine start here on the Captain Anna. We're absolutely delighted to bring you some fabulous entertainment. A young rising star, and in fact I was looking at some of her Spotify streams, her 2 million active monthly users on Spotify, extraordinary. A winner, as I say, of the MTV Push Netherlands competition. What a great voice this young lady has, and she's going to do a cover of a Charlie Puth song called Attention. Ladies and gentlemen, IBC Showcase welcomes Emma Hasters. Take it away, Emma.
Going round, throwing that dirt all on my name. 'Cause you knew that I'd call you up. You've been going round every party in LA. 'Cause you knew that I'd be in one. I know the dress is karma, perfume regret. You got me thinking that way you were mine. And now I'm all upon you, what you expect. But you're not coming home with me tonight. You just want attention, you don't want my heart. Maybe you just hate the thought of me with someone new. Yeah, you just want attention, I knew from the start. You're just making sure I'm never getting over you. You've been running around, throwing that dirt all on my name. Cause you knew that I knew.
Should say the frame rate on that's probably because of the Zoom connection rather than the mainstream. Mark, you're muted. Well, I'll as Mark is carrying on talking while he's muted, I'll.
Yes, well done, Ian. So yes, I was just saying that yeah, we were very pleased with the outcome. Like we say, didn't get the chance to really test. We had the audio and everything going through. But yeah, if it was a bit blocky, then it tends to be Zoom. So, but like I mentioned, if you do want to see more of that, then just please go to the IBC website. You should be able to see that. So now's the chance. If anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask rather, then please just fill in the Q&A box at the bottom. So Ian, I mean, from your perspective, what do you think your biggest challenge of the whole event was? It the preparation, or on the day, or? I
mean, the day is always nerve-wracking, isn't it? But at some point, if you've got the planning right, you should be able to sit. When you've got the right people there on the ground, I see Morton's on the call, and him and his team were absolutely stars on the day. Look, it was when we started thinking about this back in March, we were in a completely different place to where we ended up 6 months later, and all of those challenges in keeping that the collaboration going and the innovation going and all of that through the lockdown, I think was a big challenge. But actually, one of the biggest parts of it was the ability to kind of work with the 10 broadcasters. A lot of times, you at IBC, you'd kind of see them at the beach bar, you'd have a beer, you'd ask what they've been doing, and then you'd move off. But actually working with them in kind of close relationship for 3 or 4 months to actually deliver something like this, and then everyone doing what they do best and kind of pulling as one to kind of deliver it was really a highlight for me.
Yeah, I can understand. So, quick question: what's the roadmap for this project? I guess in terms of the Accelerate program, what next, Ian?
Yeah, I mean, the Accelerator programs are deliberately designed to be short-term sprints. So for this one, there was there's a finite amount of time. We've got, as I say, we've got a bit of a wash up. We'll be publishing some stuff. I think it's not so much a roadmap for this project, but how it fits into the kind of bigger jigsaw of everything we're doing around 5G. So there's a couple of things going on. There's a big EU funded project that a number of broadcasters, the EBU, TV2, RAI, BBC, are involved in, looking at 5G radio use for studio production. We're starting to define what the user cases are and what the integration of these technologies with our studio technologies, particularly IP studio technologies, how those will work. I am sure there will be more accelerators next year, and there will be more, I'm sure, more 5G challenges. What that will be is too early to say. I think there's a lot of appetite and potential around small scale 5G in a box type deployments, and we're really keen to look at those, and I'm sure that will continue. But for this particular project, we're going to wrap up. We're going to publish some work in probably in conjunction with the EBU. There's a deployments paper coming out in October that a number of people on the project were involved in, and we've taken the learnings from this, things like the user cases, the types of network, into that document. So there'll be some written materials that is kind of a combination and more of everything that we've been doing over 5G, and then obviously we'll continue to kind of explore the technology as it matures.
Sure. Another question: what will be the short-term type of projects which is suitable to use this technology? I mean, you could split that up between 5G and AI, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're interested in both, and we've done work on both. So in terms of AI, I think in the early days, Mark, we had a conversation where, that you'll have seen quite a lot of things in terms of AI for sport production coming along. Quite rightly, there's relatively big market in that and stuff. But we were more interested in some things like, how do you cover, I don't know, like a council meeting, or as Mark said earlier, something like a music festival where you're at a stage. You might have your kind of big OB trucks covering the main stage and stuff like that, but if you just got kind of smaller stages, quite often we don't cover those with the way they're designed to be done. Things like the Edinburgh Festival, big international arts festivals, where you've got lots of small venues, stand-up comedy. You can't park a truck outside and rig 3 or 4 cameras, and a lot of these things around kind of introducing a new talent and things like that are really interesting for the AI side of things, and it will only get better. We've done a lot of work training our algorithms really around BBC content and things like panel shows and comedy shows and music shows. I'm sure Mark has done lots of work on training their content as well. There's a long way to go in that space. In terms of 5G, 5G is just an enabler. So 5G is just about connectivity. So it really is, in order to put 3 or 4 cameras in a venue and then run an AI engine, you need to connect them somehow. And quite often building infrastructure isn't good enough, or it comes at a premium, especially if you've got uplink versus downlink constraints. So there's a desire to kind of look at new forms of technology, and 5G is one of those. And then non-public networks, whether you use the public networks or non-public networks enable us to tune these types of facilities that will give us the resilience and the performance that we need them to have. But in order to do that, we need to keep driving through conversations with the industry, both at a commercial and business operations level, as well as a technical and standards level. So we'll continue to engage on all of those conversations where appropriate.
Great. All right, Ian. Well, I think we can call it a day now. It's our question. Ian, I'd just like to say thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Not a problem.
And all for everybody for attending, for taking the time out to come and watch this afternoon.